This week on Jersey Matters, a lawsuit with national ramifications in New Jersey. Parents are suing Governor Murphy in federal court to make certain their kids don't have to wear masks when they return to school. We'll talk with the attorney filing the case. Hundreds of medical needles are found washed up on North Jersey shores. The director of Clean Ocean Action explains why this keeps happening. Nursing homes in New Jersey going bankrupt? We'll talk with the head of the New Jersey Health Association. And in Princeton, a new police tool to de-escalate potentially deadly interactions. Hello and welcome to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. The governor is being sued by parents and students in New Jersey who want to make certain that masks aren't required at school when they return in September. Here's my interview with the constitutional attorney who filed the lawsuit, Bruce Afrin. Sir, thanks so much for joining us today. Let's talk about the lawsuit that you just filed in federal court. Who are you suing and what does it allege?
Well, thank you, Larry. The lawsuit was filed in federal court in Newark. We are suing Governor Murphy, the Commissioner of Education, and the Commissioner of Health on behalf of 3 sets of parents and approximately a dozen high school students who are appearing in their own names. And the lawsuit is seeking to block any attempt to reimpose mask mandates and isolation and segregation of school children in New Jersey schools once school resumes again in September.
Why do you feel this suit is necessary, considering the fact that the governor lifted that mandate for September in schools? Do you not believe him?
Well, it's not that we don't believe him, but we do believe him. He said he's reserving the power to reimpose these rules in September. And he also authorized New Jersey school districts on their own to impose their own rules. And so we've already seen, according to one of our clients, Bordentown has already announced they're going to impose these rules in September. And the governor himself has said he's reserving the power to do it yet again. And he's now authorized all 500 plus school districts in New Jersey to issue their own mask and segregation orders. So we do believe the governor. The governor has said he's reserving the right to do it again, and he's telling school districts they can do it. And one of the problems, one of the problems we see is that the unions, which do wonderful work, are nevertheless pressing for these orders. And teachers who are fearful are demanding masking and segregation orders of children. And so the governor, we think, is responding to that largely because nowhere else in New Jersey are we seeing any effort to reimpose these orders, only in schools.
If you believe it is the teachers union that is behind this, why aren't they named in your lawsuit?
Well, the teachers union have the right to influence the governor if they wish. They're not the ones issuing these orders. It's the state that will be doing it. So it's the state that is the appropriate defendant. The governor has to respect the Constitution. Even if he has political reasons for giving into pressure, he still has to respect the Constitution and cannot impose these orders unilaterally on children.
How is this a constitutional issue?
Well, the First Amendment bluntly says there shall be no laws restricting speech or of what we call the right of freedom of association and privacy. And all of that is invoked by these orders. Children's faces are covered, teachers' faces are covered. People can no longer read the non-facial cues that are so much a part of communication. Friendships can't develop, associations can't develop when children can't see each other's faces, when you can't see whether someone's smiling or frowning at you, when you can't even tell how a teacher is reacting to you. All of this violates the right of association that the First Amendment protects. It also violates the right of privacy of the child. The child has privacy rights in their own body, in their own existence. To be forced to be masked 8 hours a day, to stay 6 feet away from every other person in school, to be kept within plastic barriers around their desk, which is what has happened in New Jersey universally. All of this violates the basic right of privacy of the child. And children have those same rights as adults.
Are there similar lawsuits across the country?
I think, frankly, Larry, I haven't studied that in detail, but I believe one lawsuit recently was filed, but frankly, I don't remember what state. It doesn't affect my judgment as a lawyer because what's happening in New Jersey is clearly against the Constitution. I think, frankly, New Jersey's rules are probably among the most stringent in the country. And it's probably not happening in too many other places.
I ask you the question because you filed in federal court, and if others have filed in federal court, as they make their way up to federal court, you know where this could possibly end up. It could end up in the Supreme Court, depending on how the rulings go. Are you willing to keep appealing it to that point?
Oh, of course. I mean, we expect that it's going to be resolved at some appeal level. This is very, excuse me, this is very similar actually to the religion cases in Brooklyn, in which the New York governor, Governor Cuomo, ordered limits of 10 people per house of worship. And the US Supreme Court intervened and said, well, this is blatantly discriminatory. It affects the religious only. All businesses and other gathering places aren't subject to these rules, but only houses of worship. So it's very similar because only children are subject to these rules. School children are the only group that is still subject to these rules. And despite the fact that hundreds of people can gather in a restaurant, in a catering hall, at a wedding, at a bar mitzvah, at a basketball stadium, thousands can gather sitting on top of each other. Nowhere does the governor require these restrictions, and only as to school children is this still an issue. This is a blatant form of discrimination, very similar to what happened in the religious context in New York.
It's a fascinating argument because I believe when they wrote into laws, you can't discriminate because of age, they weren't thinking that end of the age spectrum. They were thinking the older age of the age spectrum, but they didn't differentiate. So it is possibly discrimination because of age. Does the CDC guidelines, does that affect you at all? The fact that they're saying that school children should wear masks if they're unvaccinated when they go back in September?
Actually, Larry, the CDC guidelines are not law. They're not even regulations. They're simply, essentially, a kind of press recommendation by CDC. They are not law. They do not affect any rights of anyone anywhere in the country. New Jersey can only issue rules if we follow our own lawmaking process. There have to be hearings in New Jersey. The Commissioner of Education has to hold hearings. Expert testimony has to be presented. People have to be able to cross-examine and to appear at these hearings. And only then can an agency issue any orders. CDC's guidelines have no legal effect. Also, I have to point out, CDC has not issued expert reports. It's not issued studies showing the need for these rules. It's issued what really are just long and kind of glorified press releases. There's absolutely no science offered by CDC to support the guidelines. They haven't issued studies. They haven't issued panel hearings. There's been absolutely none of that. So none of it can really be law.
So what is the next step for you?
Well, the next step is we're going to serve the New Jersey Attorney General with this case. We're then going to ask the court to set some sort of expedited briefing schedule. Possibly we may seek an injunction to block this from going forward in September, if we need to, unless the court's able to set a briefing schedule earlier. But we're going to move forward with this probably by mid-August. I'm sure briefs will be filed in this case.
Well, good luck to you, Sarah, and we'd love to have you back.
Thank you, Larry.
Bruce Afrin, constitutional attorney. Still to come on Jersey Matters, a lead environmentalist in New Jersey is concerned about how many wind turbines they're planning for the Jersey Shore. We'll talk to her next. Welcome back. There's a whole lot going on in the waters down the Jersey Shore. Hundreds of syringes were found on the beaches from Long Branch up to Sandy Hook, and more wind turbines than we ever imagined are planned for the waters off the Jersey Shore. Here's my interview with Cindy Zipf, Director of Clean Ocean Action. Cindy, as always, thanks for giving us your time today. Everyone was alarmed when they saw the headlines in the New York papers and the New Jersey papers about needles on the shore in New Jersey again. I covered needles on the shore in New Jersey back in the late 80s. So this has been happening for a while. Is this something to be truly concerned about?
Oh, it's always something to be concerned about when we get these major garbage wash-ups. And as you had pointed out, we've been having them for decades. It's been a while since we've had such a pulse of this kind of trash and needles washing up on our coast. It deserves some further investigation as to why, but I think if you look back and reflect on the massive amounts of rain that we had coming into the inner harbor area in our region, there was a huge flush, if you will, of rain, and that usually carries with it whatever is on the streets or whatever is in the sewer systems. So there could have been, all kinds of things that were out on the street and in the storm drains and in the sewers that just got completely flushed into the waterways because it was just such a massive amount of water. Usually what happens is the sanitary guys pick up the garbage on the streets, and the sewer systems treat the sewers as sewage as it goes to the plant. But when you have that much water, there's no treatment. Everything just washed into the storm drains and then into the waterways. So perhaps that was the cause. But the fact of it is that we are very irresponsible with our plastics, with our trash. And we have a lot of infrastructure problems that need to be fixed in the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area, which is why we hope Congress gets its act together to pass the infrastructure funding they're talking about.
We should mention we're talking about an area from, I think, Long Branch up to Sandy Hook, and they're telling people to still be careful, to be diligent when you go in the water, because they believe there may be some needles that are still in there. They found a couple hundred needles already. So
Yes.
Let's move on to another topic that I know you're passionate about. You've asked for a pause on the construction of wind farms off of New Jersey. Why?
Well, what we've asked for is a pause on the expansion of offshore wind lease areas. Right now, New Jersey has over 400,000 acres committed to offshore wind development. Much of it is in the southern part of the state, but there's also a tract up off of the northern part of the state. And there are projects that are being proposed. There's one called Ocean Wind, and that project is going through its environmental impact study. And then there's also a couple of others that were just recently proposed off of South Jersey, and they are going through a public comment period. What we called for a pause on is the 800,000 additional acres off the coast of New Jersey that is being privatized, is being offered for sale, for lease, for more offshore wind. And we feel before we go ahead and double the size of the offshore wind area, we should make sure that we're doing offshore wind carefully and with respect to the ocean and the marine life that lives there. We've never done anything like this, and we need to make sure we're doing it right. If we don't, we may we may expedite the harm to the ocean in trying to help address climate change.
Right. I think that's where people are a little taken back by the whole thing, because on its surface, you believe that wind farms and wind power is good for the environment. And when you have environmental groups pushing back against it, it seems like there is some type of strange conflict there that no one expected. So you're not against the wind power, wind farms. Yeah. You just think it needs more study?
We're not against offshore wind, and we need to have everything on the table in order to address climate change. So we certainly feel the ocean can play a role. The ocean already is playing a role. If it wasn't for the ocean, we would already be cooked, right? Because the ocean is absorbing like 90% of the heat that's been put into the atmosphere since the 1950s. She's also absorbed over 25% of the carbon dioxide that we've been pumping into the air. So she has done us well to help preserve our planet, but you can't do it all. And now it's also impacting the ocean environment. So we do need to develop environmental options to fossil fuels. But what we're saying is that we need to, do it cautiously. We need to make sure that we're not going to be doing harm. And if we are going to be doing some harm, how can we mitigate those impacts? And at the same time, offshore wind is going to take years and years to develop. Whereas we could be doing things right now on land, onshore, with solar power, with wind power, with geothermal power, and most importantly, energy efficiency and conservation. If people want to help the ocean or help the planet, they can become more energy efficient. That's the greenest energy of all. And that puts more green in our wallets too. We're saving money, whereas a lot of these alternatives cost funds. But saving energy is a very inexpensive and the greenest of all the energy sources.
Well, the state is looking at money coming in right now because they just broke ground on a turbine factory for the wind turbines in South Jersey, and more factories are expected to come in middle New Jersey and North Jersey as well. So you're standing in front of a train that's going full speed at this point. It's sounds like these wind turbines are going to happen. The amount of them, though, is stunning. You gave me a statistics before we started the interview that I don't think people are aware of how big it's going to be off of Jersey Shore.
So if you add up the area that's being proposed for lease and the areas that are already committed for leasing, it's over 1 million acres, which is roughly the size of the Grand Canyon National Park.
Well, thank you so much. It was eye-opening. I don't think a lot of people realize the extent of the plans, and we will keep in touch with you and would love to have you back.
Thank you so much, Larry.
As they continue to build these wind farms. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Cindy Zipf, Director of Clean Ocean Action. Still to come on Jersey Matters.
I'm Phil Andrews, and coming up on Jersey Matters, these two officers of the Princeton Police Department will show us about a new virtual reality program they're using to help their officers out in the field.
Welcome back. Diffuse and de-escalate. Two aspects of policing that are a major part now of police training in departments across the country. Jersey Matters' Phil Andrews is here now to show us how the Princeton Police Department is training their officers. Phil.
Yes, the Princeton Police Department has entered into a virtual reality program, a program they will run their police officers through to put them in situations to help de-escalate problems when out in the field.
The VR technology of note is created by a company named WRAP and is a fully immersive state-of-the-art simulator that offers real-life situations for law enforcement officers to navigate. Princeton Police Department Chief Christopher Morgan and his force have embraced the training system with open arms.
We wanted to expand our training. We did an evaluation of our training, and we wanted to ensure that our officers were getting the best possible training that we could provide them. We saw virtual reality. We did an assessment of some of the products out there, and by far, WRAP Reality was the best product on the market for us. We're able to take an officer from a classroom setting, teach them the skills of de-escalation and decision-making, but we're then able to submerge them into a virtual reality scenario and have them demonstrate the skills back to our training officer.
All right, so what he's seeing right now is he looks around, is he's actually in this classroom, he's in this environment, and I'm about to give him a dispatch to a job. So this one's gonna be a bridge jumper. It's a suicidal female on a bridge, and he's gonna have to use his de-escalation skills to talk her off the bridge.
And you'll be very happy to know that Officer Cribbs was successful in talking that young lady off the bridge. Now, moving forward, Chief Morgan is hoping that this virtual reality platform will help set the stage for another WRAP technology product called the Bolo Wrap.
So the Bolo Wrap is really the term of using a tether that we throw out and wrap around somebody at a distance of 10 to 25 feet. And so this is the first tool that's available to police that does not use pain compliance to stop somebody, and that's talking about the Bolo Wraps.
This ingenious device, by the way, was created by inventor Woody Norris.
I got an idea to take the bola, which the gauchos used, and bring it into the 21st century. It's been discovered just through all the things that are happening in law enforcement that many of the people that law enforcement encounter aren't just criminals. They may be hard of hearing, they may be mentally challenged, they may be on drugs. And so they are oblivious, for one reason or another, to the commands of law enforcement. You don't want to kill that person. So I looked at all of those and I thought, there's got to be a way to just stop a person from walking or running away or advancing towards you, and that's what I did with the Ebola.
And of course, anytime you can use non-lethal force to defuse a situation, that's never a bad thing. In Princeton, for Jersey Matters, I'm Phil Andrews.
All right, thank you, Phil. Next on Jersey Matters.
Are you contemplating returning to your workplace? Well, one Fairleigh Dickinson University poll tells me that you are not alone. We'll have more on that coming up next on Jersey Matters.
It's been 675 days since we last had a concert, since we last had live music at PNC Bank Arts Center.
The classic rock band Chicago played at the PNC Bank Arts Center in Holmdel this week. Thursday's concert was the first since the shutdown. Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. America's workplaces are changing. Because of the pandemic, some people were forced to make a spare bedroom an office or turn a family room into a TV studio like the one I'm in right now. Many people are returning to work now, and they're ready for that. But as Kimberly Kravitz reports, others are content to stay home. Kimberly.
Returning to the workplace has been slow for many and non-existent for others. A recent poll out of Fairleigh Dickinson University reports that half of New Jersey's workforce started the pandemic working from home, and 25% of that number may never return to their workplace ever again.
So we have a lot of people here in New Jersey who say it's great. They don't want to go back to work.
New Jersey was under the assumption that at the start of COVID, we would work from home for a couple of weeks to bend the curve. But weeks turned into 16 months. For many, like Ralph Florio, it saved him tons of money.
For me, I've been saving a lot of money working from home. But CEOs are saying, well, we have this huge lease that costs crazy money and are reluctant to give up the space because they can't get out of the lease.
Just like this landlord who pays big money for a lease, only for their employees to work remotely.
That kills my part of my business, my real estate. All my office buildings will not make money because everybody will start working at home. All the office buildings is going to go down nobody's going to rent office space.
The poll also finds a significant difference between Democrats and Republicans. About half of Republicans say they want to go back into work full time, compared to 20% of Democrats. The poll also shows how mass transit is greatly impacted by the stay at home.
Remember, in New Jersey, our mass transit is funded about 40% by ticket sales and about 60% by the state. So if we find that a quarter of the people who are currently working from home are never going back, that's more than 10%, almost 15% of all the people in New Jersey. If you went to New Jersey Transit today and said, hey, you're going to lose 10% of the people riding the buses and trains, they would be in crisis mode.
Then there are the essential workers that stayed in the workplace the entire time, like this funeral director who tells me it was incredibly painful.
Our staff, we never stopped. Our industry was on overload. You know, the numbers of deaths were, they increased quite a bit. Very rewarding industry, but during the pandemic, not much reward.
For some, staying at home was simply not an option.
Well, I work based off of tips and commissions, so if I don't work, I don't make money. You know what I mean? So I was lucky enough to collect like the PUA assistance, but as soon as I can go back, I went back.
Oh, completely grateful. So grateful that I had a job, so grateful that we're able to still work with people, deal with people. I still have my clients with Century 21, Action Plus Realty, that need to sell their home. We're always safe, but you always worry. And then I have 4 kids, so you always worry about your kids and anything going to work and coming back home.
And then there are the hardworking people that are furious about those taking advantage of the system.
It really created a lot of laziness in this country, which makes me angry as a blue-collar worker because I'm working my fingers to the bone. But a lot of my benefits are paying for other people's benefits. You know, people that are taking advantage of the system. They're making more money than they've ever made before. What's the incentive to go back to work? Why would you do that?
It seems there is a bit of a disconnect between employees and employers when it comes to life after the pandemic.
Companies that don't allow for at least flexibility or a hybrid workforce going forward are going to be the ones left behind. You're just going to get better quality of workers, better quality of life.
The Fairleigh Dickinson poll says that 55% of men, as opposed to 48% of women, will return to the workplace by the end of the year. Reporting for Jersey Matters, I'm Kimberly Kravitz.
Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. Only 25% of the nation's nursing homes and assisted care facilities are confident that they'll be able to stay open another year after being devastated by the pandemic. This is according to a survey by the American Healthcare Association. The good news, however, is that isn't the case in New Jersey. Here's my interview with Andy Aronson, President and CEO of the American Healthcare Association in New Jersey. Sir, thank you so much for joining us today. A shock poll was out, a survey done by the American Healthcare Association and the National Center for Assisted Living. And I guess the headline of the survey was that only 25% of nursing homes and assisted care facilities are expected to last another year. Is that the case in New Jersey as well?
No, Larry, that's not the case. That poll, first of all, it was self-reported information by providers, and it was in the context of, are you going to last without assistance in the current state? So you have to remember that in this industry, we're coming off a pandemic that very seriously hit this industry, and occupancy rates are generally lower than they were pre-pandemic. And I think what providers were saying in that poll is, if occupancy doesn't rebound and if we don't get continued financial support from states, remember that was a national poll, then we're going to have problems. But in New Jersey, what we're seeing is we have had some support from the state as far as an enhanced Medicaid rate. We have gotten some support from the federal government financially, and we are seeing occupancy rates tick up in our facilities. So no, it's not nearly as dire as that report would suggest.
So you're not saying it's dire in New Jersey, but are there facilities that aren't going to make it?
I think generally in this industry, what you're seeing is consolidation of providers. So I think those freestanding providers that used to exist, the mom and pop facilities, we used to call them in this industry, I think are having a very hard time making it. And I think what you're seeing is more and more, we call them multi-facility chains, regional chains, are acquiring those smaller facilities. So in New Jersey, what we've seen, particularly in the nonprofit world, is those small nonprofit facilities are having trouble making ends meet in the current climate.
I'll tell you what, your demeanor is very comforting. I mean, when you read the national survey, you'd think things are dire. But are you saying that people may be saying it's worse than it is in hopes of getting more federal money or state money?
Well, first of all, it's a national poll that we're dealing with, right? So it could be different in other states than it is here. I don't want people in nursing homes or families of people that have relatives in nursing homes or assisted living thinking that their facilities are going to close down or the facilities are going to be closing doors. That's not what's going on here. We're not going to see wholesale closures or anything like that. What we've seen in New Jersey is for those facilities that have had a hard time making ends meet and have closed down, there's been another provider who's come in and purchased that facility and kept the facility open.
Nursing homes and long care facilities, even if they are going to be able to survive, at the very least, they took a hit in public relations, in their image during the pandemic. In New York, that's all that people talked about. In New Jersey, that's what people talked about. Has that had an effect?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question it's had an effect. Occupancy rates went from, in New Jersey, pre-pandemic occupancy rates were about 86% in facilities. I think at the lowest point, we were talking maybe about 61% occupied in New Jersey. So it had a huge impact. The whole shutdown during the pandemic, the new infection control standards, of course, the finances of having to deal with testing and PPE and all the other things we had to deal with. the lower occupancy rates, it had a huge impact on the industry.
Well, so you're pretty confident that the industry and most nursing homes and most long care facilities are going to be fine because of government money and consolidation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the facilities are going to be fine. There's going to be changes in the industry. There's going to be evolution in the industry. But yes, your facility where your loved one is, your facility where you're looking to place your person is not going to close down tomorrow. And nobody should look at the results of that survey thinking that, oh my God, the facility around the corner is ultimately going to close down.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you, Larry.
Andy Aronson, president of the Healthcare Association in New Jersey. Next on Jersey Matters, a record number of kids are getting injured playing sports or just playing outside. We'll talk about it next. Welcome back. Teenagers and young children have been cooped up at home for a year because of the pandemic, and now finally this summer they get the chance to go outside and run and play, and because of that there's a big spike in injuries. Dr. Mark Rieger from the Pediatric Orthopedic Center in Cedar Knolls says he's never been this busy. Doctor, thanks so much for joining us today. You know, the kids have been cooped up for over a year, most of them sitting inside playing video games. Now they finally get to get outside and exercise and join team sports. Is there a danger in that, in being dormant for so long and now all of a sudden exercising?
Yes, because what happens is the kids are no longer in shape. Their bodies have changed, and so getting back to activities, they need to take certain precautions. And actually, over the years, I've used the 7S rule to allow kids to get back to activities and to participate in activities to prevent injuries. And because most injuries are from overuse, not the one time where two athletes collide and break a bone.
So tell me what they should be doing. What precautions can parents or the children take?
So what the kids can do is again, the 7S rule is the first one is they should stretch. Of course, generally bones grow faster than muscles, and that can cause a lot of injuries. So stretching is very helpful. They can strengthen their muscles, and there's protocols to do that properly. They can go ahead and increase their activity, and so we call that speed, at a certain rate. They should never increase their activity more than 10% every week to see how they do. And then there is the equipment, so we call that shoes, to remind people that the equipment has to be appropriately sized for the children, because they have grown. And then there's also the surface that they practice on. So a lot of the times they have been on surfaces such as streets and sidewalks, which are harder on the body. So they should watch what surfaces they go ahead and have activities. And then the last thing that we look at that you can change is, we call it supper, nutrition. So eating a proper diet, when they get back, they're going to have a higher energy level and demand, and like everything else, you need to make sure that you feed the body properly so it can perform properly. And the last thing is just structurally, meaning that some kids are designed for sports and are more adept at them, and they should be going to those sports. For example, the simplest one is, if a child is taller, they should go into basketball, and that's a good sport. And if they're shorter, we use the example as, you want to be a jockey. You don't want a 7-foot man or woman on a horse riding, and vice versa. But that's the example we use. So you want to pick the right sports to get the kids back.
Are there certain activities that cause more accidents, cause more injuries?
Yes, actually. So the ones that cause more injuries are the overuse, the repetitive injuries. So pitchers, for example, they go back, they throw too many pitches. The way that I try to explain that to families is, think of it like a paperclip. If you keep bending it back and forth, eventually it breaks. The body is nice that it can repair itself, so it will not break. However, if you overdo it, it will break down, and it starts breaking down, and that's where you get the pitcher's shoulder or a pitcher's elbow or Osgood-Schlatter's, where the Osgood-Schlatter is in the knee where they do too much kicking. So it's more repetitive type of activities. The other one is the kids are out of shape or pivoting. So when you pivot, it's called proprioception, knowing where you are in time and space. And that's a skill that you have to maintain. And if you don't, they go back and they go ahead and pivot. And so we see a lot of ACL injuries. We used to do a lot of ACL before in our practice. And now with the return to sports and poor training with proprioceptive activities, we're seeing a lot more ACL injuries than we have in the past, unfortunately.
I know we can't wrap our kids in bubble wrap and kids are going to get hurt, but there is a way of minimizing injuries though.
Yes, there are. But again, that has to do with the shoe and the 7S's, the proper equipment. Kids should have proper equipment when they're playing to protect them. So helmets, pads, proper gloves, and even children who have lacrosse, usually the hands injuries we see for the kids who play lacrosse are the ones who weren't wearing gloves properly. The kids who are injuring their legs and having leg injuries are not wearing shin guards. So equipment is very important and should be used properly with the appropriate sport.
It really concerned me when you said, and I'm sure it concerns you too, that there was an increase in ACL injuries, and now we're going to get back into team sports. Is there advice that you would have for trainers on teams, the extra precautions they should be taking?
So the trainers, it's not actually devices, it's skills that they have to put the athletes through. And there are certain protocols that can be met in order to know that a child will be ready to go onto the field. So if you see the kids when they're asked to go through obstacle courses with cones and things of that nature, that's actually developing the skills to learn proprioceptive skills. And there's also criteria that could be used to see that a child actually has appropriate level of skills so they don't blow out their ACL. It's clearly, studies show that ACL injuries are clearly a preventable injury, and there's way too many of them, and it's from poor training.
Well, that's fascinating. Thank you, doctor. That's great information. I appreciate it. Dr. Mark Rieger from the Pediatric Orthopedic Center. Still to come on Jersey Matters, if you're of Italian-American descent, we've got a festival for you. We'll take you there next. Happy birthday to Lucy the Elephant in Margate, New Jersey, who is 140 years old this week. The 6-story building was once a hotel and is now an official National Historic Landmark. Here's Nick's weather.
Of course, it wouldn't be a summer weekend here in New Jersey if we weren't talking about some kind of unsettled weather. We have a frontal system that is very close to our area, and that is why we are going to see this persistent shower and thunderstorm threat with us. So just be mindful of that. I don't think it's a total washout, but there will be times that you're dodging the raindrops, so make sure you have the umbrella and the poncho with you just in case. Now, going forward into the week ahead, a briefly cooler pattern is possible. In fact, the Climate Prediction Center illustrates that quite nicely with the hot weather displaced over the northern states, the northern plains, with the really cool stuff down in Texas and Arkansas and Louisiana. We will probably see a couple days with temperatures in the lower 80s, but that's about the extent of it. Here's your outlook for the next few days on our Futurecast satellite and radar. We have some shower chances, a couple downpours. The front finally gets all the way through our area by Monday, and we should see improving conditions at that point. So in the temperature department, right around the average. In fact, by next Saturday, in the upper 70s possible. I'm Nor'easter Nick for Jersey Matters.
And Nick has been pulling double duty as our weatherman and our festival correspondent. Here's this week's Jersey Jaunt.
Every now and then I do get to escape the nice, calm, cool, and comfortable studio and trade it in for being out in the wild. We're on the grounds of the 35th annual Red, White, and Blueberry Festival, and it is so nice to see everybody out here in person and see their faces.
We're so happy to see this crowd in Hamilton, and we look forward every year. We missed everyone last year. We're excited about this.
It's a beautiful day. People are coming from everywhere. They're very complimentary about the blueberries, about all the shirts and the pies and the cakes and everything we have. and the crafters, and the car show is great.
I'd venture to say that this is the best festival and biggest festival in the state, definitely in Atlantic County. And we love being here every single year. And just look around. There's the wall-to-wall people, and everybody has a smile on their face. Everybody's enjoying themselves, and that's what it's all about.
And I'm so happy to see so many people, not only from Hamilton today, but from out of our town, that have come here to see what we enjoy every single day.
It's incredible. I have the best committee in the world, and I could not do it without it.
Hey, the fun doesn't stop with the Blueberry Festival, by the way. If you're a true Hamiltonian, you know full well that the party really gets started with the Our Lady Mount Carmel Festival in mid-July. Do you know that it's the oldest running Italian festival in the country? Mind blown. I caught up with Louis Pantalone and Frank Italiano to explain how they're getting ready for the big feast.
So in 1875, the feast was started through our ancestors by Antonino Capelli on Pine Road. At that time, they were very thankful for the safe passage to the U.S., for the plentiful crops, and just to be here in America for the opportunity. They didn't have a statue, obviously, but they paid homage to our Blessed Mother by taking a picture of her and having a procession to the fields. The society is the founders of the feast and is the sponsors of the feast. Although it's associated with the church, it is our festival, our feast, and we are proud of that. This year we'll be celebrating 146 years. A lot of people ask us why, how do you do this how do you keep it going for 146 years? And the reason for that is you have to have a dedication to our Blessed Mother. If we lose that, then tradition is lost and the meaning of the feast is gone.
It takes a whole year to have everything start. So it's not like something that just comes up in a week. It's a year of getting it set, preparing with the carnival, preparing with the church, preparing with the entertainment, the food. Procession is what it's all about. The carnival's nice, the feast is nice, the beer garden's great, the entertainment's great, but the procession, the statues are what it's all about to me.
Thanks, Nick. My commentary is next. Everything is political. I know that. I preach that. But sometimes it still surprises me. For instance, how did getting vaccinated for COVID-19 become political? A new PBS poll is stunning. 41% of Republicans are refusing to get vaccinated. Only 4% of Democrats are refusing. This despite overwhelming evidence that you have a much, much better chance of dying or getting ill from COVID-19 than from getting the vaccine. Here are some interesting facts. 334 million people in America have received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. 159 million people are fully vaccinated in this country. 3 people in America, 3 have died from a COVID-19 vaccine, all of them women who developed blood clots after getting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. As of right now in America, over 604,000 people have died from the COVID-19 virus. So based on those statistics, your chances of dying from the COVID-19 vaccine are 1 in 111 million. Your chances of dying from COVID-19 are 200,000 times greater. And still, millions across the country are defiantly, almost militantly, refusing to get the vaccine. And as long as there are enough people who refuse to get vaccinated, the COVID-19 virus will continue to mutate and become more dangerous. The Delta variant, a substantially more infectious virus than the original COVID-19 virus, is now the dominant strain in this country. So far, the vaccinations, fortunately, have worked against the Delta variant and all other variants. But states with low vaccination rates, states like Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Utah, Wyoming, they've seen a big increase in cases, 3 times more cases and hospitalizations than other states. The vast majority of those states are Republican states. And instead of telling people they should get vaccinated, Republican lawmakers instead are passing laws to protect the rights of the unvaccinated. Right now, there are bills in several Republican states to make vaccine passports illegal. Vaccine passports are something that you would have to show to prove that you're vaccinated. There are also bills to prevent vaccination mandates for schools or businesses. Montana is the first state in the union to pass a law that gives the unvaccinated legal protection from discrimination. It's the same type of protection that is given on the basis of race, gender, or religion. In other words, politicians are pandering to the unvaccinated and giving them safe haven to stay unvaccinated, which means it's unlikely we'll ever reach herd immunity where there are so many people vaccinated, the virus just dies out because it can't find a host. Instead, the virus is allowed to live on, mutate, until it finally reaches a strength where it's vaccination resistant. And then we're looking at another pandemic. That's the moral question here, isn't it? Do you think of yourself or do you think of the common good? If you're young and you're healthy, even if you get COVID-19, chances are you're going to be fine. But you'll spread it to others who may not be fine. There is also some rich irony in the fact that many of the people who are against masks and shutdowns are the same people who are refusing to get vaccinated, not realizing that getting vaccinated is the key to ending masks and shutdowns for good. Look, right now we are going in the wrong direction. Cases and hospitalizations are up once again week to week. 97.5% of the people who have contracted COVID-19 are unvaccinated. 99.2% of the people who died from COVID-19 aren't vaccinated. Everyone in my family is vaccinated. We all got the vaccination as soon as we were able to, and I'm proud of that. I hate that the country is so politically divided over something that should bring us all together. And so I simply ask, if you haven't been vaccinated, you reconsider that decision. If not for you, for those you love, and for the rest of the country. Forget the politics. In a very real way, all of us are counting on you. I'm Larry Menti. We'll talk again soon.